Welcome to Prime 9, the countdown show that covers the very best in baseball. Guaranteed to start arguments, not end them. This week, it's the top 9 Cinderella seasons. Why 9? That's baseball. 9 players, 9 innings, Prime 9. So what are Cinderella teams? Quite simply, these are teams that came out of nowhere and got to script spectacular fairy tale seasons.
It's the impossible dream revisited.
Proving that anything is indeed possible.
Phillies are the 93 National League champions!
We gave some extra weight to teams whose ride to the ball never turned into a pumpkin. That is, they won it all.
The Twins have won the World Series!
But there are some teams whose season was so unbelievably unexpected.
The Mariners are going to play for the American League Championship! I don't believe it!
They still made our list, even though they never got to wear baseball's version of the glass slipper.
Rays are going to the World Series!
So let's get it on with our top 9 Cinderella seasons, starting with number 9 on Prime 9. In their first 18 years of existence, the Mariners had just 2 winning seasons. Times were tough in Seattle.
Leading up into the 1995 season, there was uncertainty about the franchise, even whether or not the ball club was going to be able to stay. The Mariners just needed to give the fans something to really cheer and rally around, in which they didn't.
The source of that hope was a talented young team starting to come of age. But then their brightest star came crashing down.
May 26th at the Kingdom.
Griffey up against the wall, and he makes the catch and crashes into the fence.
Made an incredible catch, but he shattered his wrist and was out for 3 months.
And quite frankly, when that happened, I thought, boy, there goes the season.
With Junior out of action until mid-August, the Mariners fell as far as 13 games out of first. But when he returned, their Cinderella story began to unfold.
Now Griffey unloads to deep right, the game is over.
Once we pulled it back within about 10 games back, everybody started focusing on, hey man, we got a chance here.
And they ran down the Angels in a series of preposterous late season come-from-behind wins.
And we finished the season tied, and we had a 1-game playoff.
It was as dramatic a game as had ever been played in Seattle because it was loser out.
1 game to decide the American League West.
And that game was one when Randy Johnson was on the mound blowing away the Angels.
The Mariners couldn't lose. They got to the playoffs for the very first time in their 19th season in the history of the franchise.
It was one thing to get there, but now they had to face the Yankees.
So they go to New York and lose the first game 9-6. Game 2 was just crushing.
This one by Mattingly, hang on to the roof.
They've got to beat the Yankees 3 wins in a row.
We got to win tonight, not worry about tomorrow. We got to win tonight.
They won that night and the next to tie the 5-game series.
Game 5 was our advantage. We were playing at home, and I thought that the Yankees were going to have a tremendous amount of pressure.
But New York shook off that pressure to take a 1-run lead into the bottom of the 11th. And then...
Lou Piniella said it best when he said that was the hit, the run, the game, and the season that saved baseball in Seattle.
For much of the 1900s, the Tigers were a proud franchise. But the new millennium saw dark days descend on Detroit.
Well, I had been with the Tigers, since 2001. Been through a lot of terrible seasons.
The Tigers have now lost 118 for the season.
What a tough year it was for the entire Tigers organization.
So the fans, the players, everyone was ready for a winning season.
And thanks to some key new acquisitions, 2006 did offer that promise.
We're going to see this Detroit Tiger team in the playoff pretty soon.
To lead them in that quest, the Tigers brought in Jim Leyland, a veteran manager and World Series winner.
In 2006, it was something magical. I really don't know how to explain it other than that. It seemed like everything just came together.
As we rolled through the season, we started winning games. We got to about the midway point. We said, hey, we got a chance here.
8 straight wins for the Tigers. They are rolling.
kept going. We kept playing great baseball. We had the best record in baseball for a long time. Hit a little wall towards the end of the season, but still had enough to get into the playoffs.
And so the Tigers will enter the playoffs as the wild card, and they will take on the New York Yankees.
They took them on and they took them down, beating the heavily favored Yankees in the division series.
To be able to overcome all the naysayers, I think right there we showed that this team was made of something special.
Cinderella has officially arrived in the ALCS.
Then to beat Oakland, and one of the probably most memorable moments in Detroit history with Maglia hitting the walk-off home run in Detroit.
Swinging a fly ball, left field, it's deep, it's way back! The Tigers are going to the World Series!
And the most special part about it was just seeing the city and the way that they embraced us and the way we lifted everybody's spirits.
And while they came up short in the Fall Classic, Detroit will never forget its 2006 Tigers.
That was a tremendous season. I'm glad it happened. And I'd like to get back there, actually.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the top 9 Cinderella seasons. You've heard the case for both 9 and 8. We now continue with number 7.
For the first time ever, the Minnesota Twins are the world champions.
After winning their first World Series in 1987, the Twins went backwards, culminating with a last-place finish in 1990. And so they added some new faces during the winter, new faces, but older players.
We were kind of struggling as a team, and you got all these cast-offs that everyone thought was washed up.
And Chile hits it, and it is gone!
With the addition of a veteran slugger and a wily pitcher, the Twins began to defy expectations.
Jack Morris, Shane Mack, Pagliarulo, and then you insert Kirby Puckett, the hometown boys, and we gelled as a unit.
And the Minnesota Twins have gone from last to a tie for the American League West.
The Twins took off in the postseason, where ALCS MVP Kirby Puckett hit .429 and led Minnesota past Toronto in 5 games.
And the Minnesota Twins have gone from the cellar to the penthouse in the American League.
But the Twins weren't the only team that had gone from last to first in 1991. The Atlanta Braves were enjoying a Cinderella season of their own just 1 year after sporting the worst record in baseball. After losing the first 2 games in Minnesota, Atlanta stormed back to take a 3-2 series lead and seemed on the precipice of sweeping the final 4 games.
There was that feeling that, look, this is slipping away from the Twins. They had that 2-0 lead. They go to Atlanta, they lose all 3 games, and you're saying, no way, how can they extend their season?
By heeding the words of their emotional leader in Game 6.
I just felt really good that day, and I told the guys that came to the clubhouse and I called in a meeting. I said, guys, don't worry about it today. You got to jump on my back. I'm going to carry you today.
In one night, you had 2 of the greatest moments in Minnesota sports history, the catch and then the home run.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Yeah.
And then it bleeds into Jack Morris in Game 7.
I never had the focus in any game I ever pitched in my entire life that I did in Game 7. I don't know how it can get any better to play in your hometown, to have the kind of year for the Twins, and I willed my way to win.
The Twins are going to win the World Series. It's a 1-0 10-inning victory.
It was a dream come true.
In their first 10 years of existence, Tampa Bay finished last 9 times and won as many as 70 games just once. Was there any reason to believe that 2008 would be any different?
Coming into a year that had so many question marks because they lost almost 100 games the year before.
But there was young talent on this team beginning to grow.
Evan hits it out.
And some impactful veterans.
Swinging a drive. It is gone. The Rays win.
No longer the Devil Rays, the Rays also had a new look to go with their sunny new outlook. The optimism was infectious.
I could tell this team has something special.
Long go, go, go.
And every time I kept on saying it, I think people looked at me like I was crazy.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why you feel good about being a Ray right now.
The chemistry was clicking.
Let's go to work, come on.
And the Rays proceeded to post their first ever winning season. Overcoming the beasts in the American League East.
You're running out of words to say what this team is doing.
Comfortable they come from in the last few years.
Once we got a hold of first place, nobody wanted to let it go.
And the Tampa Bay Rays are going to the playoffs. But why stop there, as the Rays beat Chicago 3-1 in the division series?
In the postseason for the first time, the Tampa Bay Rays are headed to the American League Championship Series,
where the mighty Red Sox were waiting to pounce.
The American League Championship Series was extremely exciting. It was very intense.
And it went down to the wire, with Tampa Bay adding another chapter to its fairy tale season in Game 7.
Ewerber's got it! Rays are going to the World Series!
And to beat Boston, this incredible powerhouse, it says a lot about this ball club.
They didn't win the World Series, but baseball in Tampa Bay had been forever changed.
After 10 years of futility, they're champions of the American League tonight.
Welcome back to Prime 9, featuring the top 9 Cinderella seasons. The 95 Mariners got things started, followed by the 2006 Tigers. Next came the 91 Twins. At number 6, the 2008 Rays, which means it's time for number 5. In 1960, the Pittsburgh Pirates were hoping to end years of futility.
They began to build with some really good players. Dick Groat, the captain and shortstop, Roberto Clemente, Vernon Law, the pitcher, Bob Friend. People began to say, hey, this ball club can contend.
I think we have probably one of the finest defensive ball clubs in the league, and that certainly helps a pitcher.
So does having 8 All-Stars, which the Pirates did that year. Best of all, they won the National League pennant.
That 60 year was kind of a magical year for all of us. The icing on the cake was, of course, playing in the World Series against the New York Yankees. The Yankees were predicted to beat us 4 straight.
The underdog Pirates won Game 1, but the Yankees reasserted their dominance by winning the next 2 by a combined score of 26-3.
We beat the hell out of them with RBIs and runs scored and everything.
The Pirates got up off the mat to win Games 4 and 5. And while the talent-laden Yankees outscored them 46-17 through the first 6 games, Pittsburgh made it to Game 7, where with the game tied in the 9th, an unlikely hero took center stage.
Bill Mazeroski will lead off in the last of the 9th.
All I'm thinking about walking up to the plate was, I got to hit the ball hard somewhere. I got to get something started.
Here's a swing and a high fly ball going deep left. They do it. It is home run. The Pirates win.
Anyone who was there will never forget that sight with that ball clearing that fence.
It is all over in one of the most dramatic finishes on history.
When I hit second base, I don't think I touched the ground until I got home. I was jumping around.
One of the most titanic struggles in baseball history.
The Dodgers were no strangers to the playoffs in the 80s, but few expected much of the team in 88. What they didn't know was how much impact the acquisition of hard-nosed veteran Kirk Gibson would have.
The attitude of our team was about to change with the addition of Kirk Gibson.
And Oral Hershiser had a Cy Young Award season, breaking Don Drysdale's record with 59 straight scoreless innings.
Hershiser sets consecutive scoreless innings pitch record.
Well, this has been almost a dream year for this club. A lot of people thought that we would just be contenders and not winners. So it is satisfying to pick the club up and to go out and have a good year.
The Dodgers did make it to the playoffs, but they had to face the Mets, who had won 100 games that year. The Dodgers were decided underdogs, but took care of those mighty Mets in a classic 7-game series.
In the World Series, the theme is California, here we stay.
And while the Dodgers had reached the World Series, their eventual league MVP had been injured and was seemingly unavailable against the formidable Oakland A's. Gibby was not in the lineup for Game 1, but Cinderella stories can unfold in many ways.
Now, even though it was only a 1-run game going to the 9th,
Dennis Eckersley comes out of the bullpen, and at that time, Eckersley was all but invincible. Gibson says to Lasorda, well, he thinks he has one good swing in him.
I said, great, and I just ran out. I didn't give him time to say anything else for fear that he might change his mind.
And with 2 out, you talk about a roll of the dice. This is it.
Before the 3-2 pitch, I stepped out of the box and said to myself, partner, sure as I'm standing here breathing, you're going to throw me that 3-2 backdoor slider, aren't you?
And Eckersley, in fact, does throw the backdoor slider. And Gibson takes a swing. It's all arms. He's kind of reaching.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone! I don't believe what I just saw! I don't believe what I just saw!
I mean, the snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, so to speak, in that 9th inning, it changed the complexion of the entire series.
Now the Dodgers have Hershiser, who was on fire, and he's going to pitch Game 2, and he wins Game 2. And they have Hershiser waiting for Game 5, and they steal Game 4 in between, and they win somehow.
Got him! They've done it!
Nobody thought we could beat the Mighty Mets! No! Nobody thought we could beat the team who won 104 games! Nobody believes it!
The nation's capital was home to the Washington Senators, who were losers more often than not, despite the brilliance of Walter Big Train Johnson.
He had been with the Senators since 1907, and he had never gone to the World Series.
But Johnson had an amazing year in 1924, winning the pitching Triple Crown while leading his team to the pennant. At the age of 36, he'd finally play in a fall classic, but it didn't start the way he would have liked.
Johnson lost his first 2 series starts.
He looked like he was going to be the GOAT of the series.
But the Senators forced a 7th game with the powerful New York Giants. And while Johnson did not start it, he did perform a miracle.
Johnson pitches scoreless ball in the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. And in the bottom of the 12th, Earl McNeely hits a ground ball to third base. Muddy Rule scores the winning run, and Washington is in an uproar.
After waiting all those years, Walter Johnson turned out to be the hero of the 1924 World Series. One of the great Cinderella stories of all time.
We now return to Prime 9, where this week we're featuring the top 9 Cinderella seasons. This category is open to any team, any league, at any time, or at least since 1901. All they have to do is catch lightning in a bottle for a single season. So now it's time for the top 2. 2 teams we think best exemplify Cinderella teams. We begin with number 2. From 1905 to 1913, Boston's National League team lost more than 100 games 6 times. By 1914, they were known as the Boston Braves, but their fortunes still remained the same.
On July 4th, the Braves were not only in last place, but they were 15 games out. It was a dead season for them.
But with no one else in the National League pulling away from the pack, the Braves staged one of the greatest comebacks in the modern era.
Literally, coming out of nowhere, they made this mad dash for the pennant.
Mad dash indeed. The Braves went an incredible 45-11 in August and September. A magical run that allowed them to win the NL title going away.
When you realize that they won the pennant by 10.5 games, it's clear that they had one of the all-time great runs.
But waiting for them in the World Series were the dominant Philadelphia A's, winners of 3 of the last 4 fall classics.
There are many modern historians who think that the Philadelphia Athletics of the period 1910 through 14 were the greatest of all teams. So this World Series was supposed to have been a romp for the A's.
Well, someone forgot to tell the Braves, who swept the A's aside in 4 straight. Boston's worst-to-first surge in their disposal of the A's earns them a place as our second greatest Cinderella team.
That 1914 season was an absolute freak.
I think there has never been an upset to match the 1914 Braves victory over the A's.
The New York Mets came into being in 1962. and immediately became the joke of the league, losing more than 100 games in 5 of their first 6 years. A change in direction was deemed necessary.
Losing was getting old, and by the time the '68 season was around, we made the best deal the Mets could ever make. We acquired a manager.
When the Mets traded for Gil Hodges, he changed things around. He bought the Dodger way of playing and style, and we began playing good baseball.
The Mets won 73 games in '68, and their excitable fans hoped that they might have their first winning season in '69. After all, they did have some studs on the mound.
When I think of that year, I think about the pitching staff that the Mets had.
You run a Seaver and a Kuzman and a Gentry out there, you're going to win a lot of games.
The Mets pitching staff finished second in the league in ERA and first in team shutouts, but the team still faced an uphill battle.
Early in the season, we got to 500 around June. We were still behind Chicago by 10, 12 games, and we really put it together, and we won about 60 games the second half of the year.
That hot streak put the Mets in position to inch closer to first when they met Chicago in early September. Unfortunately for the Cubs, the Mets weren't all they crossed paths with.
The ground crew let this little kitten out, and Ron Santos in the on-deck circle, and the cat walked right behind him, stopped right in front of our dugout.
And that's when I said to myself, that's not good.
And he was right, as the Mets swept the 2-game series and wound up winning the division. An incredible feat, considering their past.
We went from 10 or 12 games behind to 10 games in front at the end of the season.
They had been so awful that when they finally did get there, the place went absolutely mad.
But the Mets weren't done. They beat the Braves in the first ever LCS and then faced the powerful Baltimore Orioles in the World Series, a team that had won 109 games. Pitching and defense had gotten these amazing Mets this far, and they saw no reason to change.
A.G. made 2 catches that the world still remembers. They are 2 of the great catches in World Series history.
Ron Sabota made probably the best catch I've ever seen.
Up 3-1 on the O's, the Mets proceeded to write the final chapter of this fairy tale season.
And as that ball's coming down, I'm just saying, don't drop it, squeeze it, Cleon, squeeze it.
The Mets are the world champions. Gary Kuzman being mobbed. Look at this scene.
To this day, it was a tremendous feeling. That was a high that, we never came down off of.
No matter what happened, no matter where we were down 6-0 in Pittsburgh, came back and won that ball game because we never put our heads between our legs and we always fought, and it's the greatest feeling in the world.
Anyone who was an underdog any time in his life had to identify with the '69 Mets. To me, it's the greatest upset in history.
Before we close the book on this Cinderella story, consider that it wasn't that long ago that the Mets celebrated the 40th anniversary of that 1969 team. I guess you could say the glass slipper still fits. Finally, even though they didn't make our list, it should be noted that in their history, the Florida Marlins have never won a division title, and yet they own 2 World Series titles. That may not qualify them as Cinderella teams, but it sure is wild. That's our Prime 9. What's yours?